Dolly Parton's death at 80 leaves a significant void in country music and philanthropy, but Dolly was an incredible entrepreneur. That's a legacy we want to discuss today. For more, let's head to Sydney. We're joined by Darren Woolley from Trinity P3. Her legacy, obviously we talk about country music, but so many of the quotes we've been hearing since she passed, and of course from her life, all about getting up from where you were and creating something, right?
Absolutely. Look, it's a sad day for the world, I think, because Dolly Parton embodied so many positive attributes. You know, as a personal brand, she was one of the best. And I think, you know, authenticity is what actually leached out of every single action and every word she said and shared. And I think that's what we need to remember.
And marketing surveys showed she was actually the most popular entertainer, personality in America. I don't know anyone who's ever said a bad word about Dolly Parton, but she talks about it. She talks about how you've got to get through the rain to see the rainbow. She talks about how there's no such thing as natural beauty, which is great news for you and I.
Well, look, you know, let's talk about her from a branding point of view. You know, first of all, she put on this incredibly distinctive look and style, which, you know, in the early days she was mocked for, but she stuck with it and it became part of who she was. But underneath that was this incredibly generous and warm-hearted person that never ever forgot where she came from. And in fact, she could have easily been another billionairess in America with the success of her business, but she gave so much back. She had reading. Her biggest philanthropy was providing books to young children and for parents to read. You know, this is a woman that lived a set of values, and I think that's what we all connected with, is that they were very human values and very, very, very authentic. You know, she was a real person, not just a celebrity.
Every week you and I talk about the issues that marketing and brands are going through these days, given there's so much going on. And Dolly Parton, who, you know, 80 years old, was brilliant at transcending whichever trend we were going through. And you use that term, authenticity. I think of her humour. You know, she used to say, people call me dumb and blonde. I know that isn't the case. I'm not dumb and I'm certainly not blonde. What I love when we talk about her kind of secrets to success: use the look, sell the goods, keep control. What's the message from those three things that all brands could look at for eternal success?
Well, look, the first one is the consistency in her look and style and the way she presented. You know, she had real discipline, and I think that came from the fact that she was being very genuine about it. The second was that, you know, the look stood out and got people's attention. The fact that we can just say Dolly, and almost every person listening to this will have that image of the big hair and the makeup and the fun that just went around that. And the third one was this keep control, because, you know, she actually kept the rights to all of her performances. In fact, there's a story that Elvis's manager said, well, Elvis will record this, but we'll share the recording rights. And she said, no, I keep the publishing and recording rights no matter what. And so Elvis didn't do it. And she cried, but she said it was crying because sometimes the most important things, the most important decisions are highly emotional. This is a woman that lived her brand and lived her life.
And then along came the Bodyguard film, of course, with Whitney Houston's cover, and the rest is history there as well. What lessons, though, can brands learn? Because you've got Donald Trump lowering the flag at half-mast across the United States for a week. NBC Nightly News' entire broadcast last night was dedicated to Dolly Parton. I have never seen that happen. And then Anthony Albanese in Australia paying tribute as well. She transcended different types of government, the left or the right, yet she was opinionated. She made jokes. And in this day and age, it's like you have to pick a side. I never knew where Dolly stood politically, but I knew that what she stood for was authentic at the same time. And where you've got brands constantly getting themselves into trouble where they pick a side because they want to live on the edge. Dolly lived on the edge, but didn't offend. Talk to us about that power.
Well, I think what we're seeing here is it coming from a core set of values that she never compromised. What we're seeing with influencers and celebrities these days is that often they will take a position in a way that alienates a large group of people. Dolly managed to do it even when she was being, let's say, controversial, with that sense of humour. You know, she was often self-deprecating in that humour. She wasn't putting anyone else down. She was making her point coming from her values and her real world experience. One of her favourite things is never forget where you came from. And I don't think she ever did. And so people could connect and relate to that. And they would take what she said for what it meant. You know, it was coming from a place of her sharing her view of the world at any particular time. The interesting thing is, in the social media world where people get cancelled and brought undone, she was able to navigate by being true to those values and delivering it in a way that entertained, charmed, or even amused us. And so we still heard the message without being angry about it or upset or hurt.
Yeah, and using poverty as a way to say, I came from nothing, I got nothing to lose. Let's move on to our next topic today. The Sydney Swans scandal sparking outrage, 5 players facing disciplinary action amid that police investigation over what happened in a hotel in Melbourne 2 weekends ago. So let's talk about this. Obviously, there's what defines acceptable behaviour for AFL players, which is something that is a topic that probably no one will ever be able to find an definite answer on. But in terms of the brand, which is really interesting here, and if you watch the press conferences, if you watch what everyone's saying, they are terrified that brands are going to flee because of the impact that the actions may have had on the way female supporters and AFLW players feel about the team, the club as well.
Well, the other thing, Ahron, is that the Sydney Swans has built a big following in the Emerald City by being openly trying to attract female followers. I mean, it has been a very female focus because, let's be honest, half the audience, half the population are women, and AFL offers a great spectacle both for the male players and the female competition, or the women competition. So, you know, it was really important for their success to be able to do that, particularly when they were breaking into what was traditionally an NRL stronghold. Having said that, this feels like a huge letdown. The players have let themselves down. The club has let themselves and their followers down. And look, the AFL, all of these big sporting codes are relying on huge investments from sponsors and from TV and media rights. And no one wants to be associated with a code that has so many issues when it comes to the relationship and the way they treat women. You know, there's a lot of talk happening for many years in the AFL about dealing with these issues, but clearly there's a lot more work to do. And I think, you know, they need to really consolidate back here and start to work out not just what went wrong, but how can they make it not happen again? Because we're talking about billions of dollars.
We obviously don't know exactly what happened in that hotel room, and we may never know. Obviously, there are a lot of rumours and speculation about what may have occurred, but we get the gist that there were men and there were strippers on the other side and something occurred, and now police are investigating there as well. From a brand perspective, what does the Sydney Swans now have to do to reassure brands and the AFL in that wider side that this is going to be dealt with and this isn't going to be swept under the rug as another boys will be boys case that often plagues big sporting groups when things go wrong?
And this is the problem, is that often it's, yes, there's a lot of outrage at the time, and yes, we're going to put in programs, but this is something that is clearly core to the culture of these clubs and perhaps the organisation. Yeah, and so this is really, it doesn't matter, I just want to disagree with you on one thing, it doesn't matter what happened in that room. The fact that it's become such a big issue is rightly the thing that needs to be addressed. You know, those people that were involved need to obviously find some sort of justice or reconciliation or some sort of solution. But the bigger thing is, how do we make sure that as a code and as a sport and as individuals, this behaviour does not continue? Because we can't have this popping up every 2 to 3 years in some shape or form. Relationships between men and women in this country are already fraught. You know, when the fact is that the most likely person to kill a woman is their domestic partner or loved one, it's already a big issue in society. We can't have sports people who are role models performing in the same way and showing huge disrespect for women.
Darren Woolley, you've said it very well. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Ahron.